Welcome to the Calm Cockpit, where pilots of all levels can find high-performance tools, actionable strategies, and access to professionals who can help you fly smarter and stress less.
Also, welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of the Calm Cockpit. We're starting this season with something just a little bit different.
We're going to switch seats today. Instead of us interviewing a guest, we have Avi Gordon, a meditation teacher and podcaster, and he is going to interview us. He's going to give us an eye to a professional aviator's and a wellness professional's take on the performance strategies that matter most for pilots.
We'll be breaking down the high-pressure mindset pilots live in every day, why stress gets so deeply wired into aviation culture, and what actually helps, not in theory, but in practice.
We'll also be sharing our top tips and must-have resources from Season 1. These are the things that our guests taught us, the tools that consistently rise to the top, and the practices we see pilots using again and again with real success.
Avi will share 8 strategies for pilots. These are his top recommendations for achieving sustainable high performance without risking a crisis or breakdown. The conversation gets right to the core of what we created this podcast for, real tools for real aviators.
The Calm Cockpit Podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode. I'm Geeta Brown, licensed yoga and meditation and music educator with over 30 years of teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress. And I'm also a midlife student pilot.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and flight instructor.
I'm really excited for you guys to hear this interview with Avi. For today's show, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about him here. Then you'll hear the interview. And after the interview, John and I are going to give you our top picks from Season 1, those sort of must-have moments that you can go back and listen to. But first, a little about Avi. Avi is a dedicated mind-body coach. He's a meditation teacher and he's an author. Highly recommend his book in the Audible format because he narrates it. It's fantastic. And he is committed to helping individuals cultivate a life of clarity, purpose, and joy. I met him in his role as the director of the Integral Yoga Teachers Association, and he's the host of the Integral Yoga podcast. He explores holistic well-being, and he draws from his extensive experience in mindfulness, personal growth, and spiritual living. And I wanted to bring him on the episode because I've been seeing so much of the work that he's done in the Integral Yoga Teachers Association and also in his own podcast. His curiosity and his wisdom is so evident in everything he does. What better person to come on the podcast than Avi to help us look at like those sticking points in aviation mental health and performance training and to kind of poke into some of those dark corners and look at ways that we can illuminate our own training and our own mindset. And I said, Avi, will you please come on and actually interview us because you're so skillful at doing that? And he said, sure. But of course, he's a skillful educator and he actually has a background in international education as well. He's taught overseas. So I said, please also give us your own tips. So he's going to give you 8 strategies towards the end of the interview. And these are the ones that he recommends for pilots that will help you improve your performance, help your well-being, that wonderful golden goal of you get the performance and the well-being in one package. So he has so much to share. I think you will enjoy listening to him as much as I do. And so without further ado, let's get to the interview with Avi Gordon and Geeta and John in the hot seat.
Thank you both for having me on. It's an honor and congratulations on 1 year of this project, the Calm Cockpit podcast. It's amazing. I think there's a lot of passion and good well wishes that you have for aviators everywhere. So let's maybe go back to the start. John, I want to begin by asking you, how did the idea of the Calm Cockpit podcast come? And was there like a specific aha moment that you had? It was like, oh, I really need to do this and move forward with it.
It's funny. I think it's something that's been brewing for a long time. Everybody's kind of heard some of the challenges that I've had over the years in terms of just the stress that the career and frankly, just getting into the career can cause. And certainly I had some of that. I did a podcast for another organization for years. And when I left that organization and wasn't doing it anymore, I kind of always thought maybe there was something percolating in the back of my brain of a way to kind of get back to doing that, because it was one of the things I really enjoyed about that role. Geeta and I had met through that podcast almost 8 months prior, something like that. And it was all about taking the knowledge from another industry or another area of life and bringing it into aviation. I've always thought that that's kind of interesting because so often we're so internally focused and ideas get regurgitated and just said over and over again. I mean, the joke that we had at the association is that every article in the magazine has been done and it's on about a 3-year cycle. So, landings are always going to be an issue. Pilot fatigue is always going to be an issue. And it's just somebody writes an article and the next person waits a little while and then writes the same thing over again. And so looking outside of aviation as a whole just kind of really struck me that, like, why isn't anybody doing this? And so I had spoken to a sailing instructor and I had spoken to other industries, and Geeta came along and we started talking about the idea of yoga and meditation and the effects that can have for the stressed out perfectionist lifestyle that we so often find ourselves in when it comes to aviation. And I thought that was kind of a one and done. I had just left maybe a month prior that role. And I was sitting at a airline terminal, just kind of thinking to myself, like, what could I possibly do with this? And I knew that the contacts that I had in that side of the world, like, it wasn't going to last forever. So if I was going to do something, I needed to kind of strike while the iron was still hot before I people forgot about me. And I just texted Geeta and said, hey, I've got this idea. I know that I'm not the only one that gets stressed out about this stuff. And I've gotten myself into the mentoring role over the years, and I know that sort of the next generation is going to encounter the same types of things that I did. Luckily, I feel like for the most part, I'm through a lot of that, but every day passes, another person encounters it. So I sent Geeta just a couple ideas of, like, what do you think? Do you think this would translate into something people would listen to? And of course, she responded and said, yeah, I think so. So that was it was born from a delayed maintenance broken airplane at Atlanta Hartsfield Airport. And we ran with it.
Yeah. I tend to find that the best ideas really come from seeing that there's a need or a problem somewhere, and that kind of sparks a certain amount of motivation. So, John, how would you kind of summarize what is the problem here that you're trying to address or help with?
When it comes to the pilot lifestyle, and just humans in general. I mean, we're always talking about stress and anxiety and fatigue. And so often, I mean, even just the American culture in general, we just feel like, okay, we have to push through, just rise and grind. That's the thing. Everybody's got it on their coffee mugs and t-shirts and whatever. But what does that even mean? Like, does that mean just like be miserable and keep going? Maybe. So, with pilots and especially, it's mission driven. It's put your head down, finish the flight, do what you got to do, be safe, but keep going. So in our case, it's how do we provide those tools for people that are going to do what they need to do anyways, but give them that carrot of, if you can just fix it a little bit, your life is going to be better, your performance is going to be better. And so, like, if I can tell a pilot, if you just go after these ideas that maybe you think are a little bit off in left field, your flying is going to be better, your flying is going to be safer. That carrot is enough to drive pilots to do something good for themselves, when so often they're looking at externally what's good for the job or what's good for the passengers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think that tends to be a stronger motivator than just overall being happier, living a better life? like specifically, like, it's in a way more specific or more tangible that this can help you be a better pilot because they've already decided that that's something that's important to them. Yeah.
In a lot of cases, that's more important than anything else. Being the best, flying the best, being safe, accomplishing the mission, for most of us, that's more important than being happy, than anything else in life. I mean, so often, how many times have we talked about the pilot divorce rate? Yeah, the job is hard, but that's because a lot of times pilots forget what their priorities are, and the job becomes the priority and family becomes second. Reminding the pilots that there are benefits to those kinds of things that can improve all aspects of their life, I think is important. And those that were going to do it have already done it. That was something that we learned from the educational association that I used to work for. The articles that we were writing, the content that we were putting out, they were beneficial to anybody that looked at them. But the people we were trying to reach weren't reading them. We were preaching to the choir. So at the end of the day, what can you do to get the people that aren't going to look or read or watch? How can you get them to do it? And the easiest thing for a group of pilots is to say, if you take the time to do this, you will get better in that thing that you are striving for the most. And so it's that like carrot at the end of the stick that says, if you pay attention to your life just a little bit more and you focus on the fact that like, yes, you feel these things, that pilot that you see, if you're an up and comer, that pilot that you see walking through the airline terminal, it looks like they've got all their stuff together. They've put a lot of work into it and it didn't happen right away. So don't feel like you're a failure because you had a flight that didn't go well, or a landing that wasn't great, or a training event that went sideways. Like these things happen to people, but just like anything else, so often social media or anything else, people talk about the wins. Nobody talks about the losses. And I'm not afraid to talk about those things. I've had some losses. That's okay. I'm still here.
Like the power of vulnerability, right? It's really, I think I'm finding it to be maybe the greatest service that we can do for others. This loss, this part of ourselves that maybe we don't feel so great about, having the courage to speak to it. Now you're giving permission for other people to do the same. And that's where change starts,
Exactly.
Geeta, I'm curious about your perspective, considering that you're relatively new to this whole world. So what do you make of what John says with all this experience that he has over the years, just getting started? How does that affect you as a new pilot?
It has been astounding to me once I got over my fear enough that I could actually pay attention to the pilots around me. I was kind of astounded at the lack of awareness of healthcare and self-care. Quite honestly, I was a little bit shocked. I'll be kind of honest. From, the flight training environment all the way through the limited bit I've seen of the professional pilots, and certainly John and our guests have illuminated a lot of that. It kind of blew me away because I sort of feel like they're about 50 years behind where the rest of the culture is. Sorry, not sorry, as John cringes. But for example, when I was early on in my music career, that's when I started to get really into yoga and meditation. Similar to what John was saying, it helped me to feel like I was performing better. And that's what mattered the most to me. Getting up on stage and, hitting the high G at the end of the second movement of Beethoven 6 was like everything. So if the meditation, the yoga helped me to handle that pressure on the Japan tour to do that, I was all for it. But then I started to notice that my whole life started to improve. And then I started to notice, I'm actually working less hard and I'm getting much more result. And my whole work-life balance changed along the way. It was a very long process. And early on, in those days, musicians used to ridicule me, make fun of me, demean me. It was horrible things they would say about me when they would see me physically warming up or doing meditation or breath work. I was sort of ostracized from the classical community. It was not a thing that you did. It was very much like the pilot community. It was, why would you stretch your shoulder? That's embarrassing. Don't do that. But all these years later, now classical musicians come to me because they're like, we need this in our lives. It's become much more mainstream. So then when I got to the pilot community, I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm back where I was in conservatory when I was sort of one of the only people doing physical breath work. I wasn't one of the only ones, but one of the people who was visibly doing it backstage. I sort of felt like this is the same thing. It's that same mindset of we have to be in performance mode all the time. And we can't show that we're human beings in a human body with a challenging life. And so if we start to do things that are maintaining that physical, mental, spiritual, emotional well-being, it's almost like admitting that we're flawed. And because we're performing all the time, we can't show it. Does that sort of make sense? So I sort of feel like in all the environments, there's this layer of don't show who you are. Just be professional. And so when you show that vulnerability, a lot of times it's met with, well, you must not be that intelligent or that good because you're willing to be vulnerable. And that's where I love having these conversations, because I say the vulnerability is the strength. It's the strength. The self-care is the strength. It's the new form of intelligence that I feel like we're moving towards in culture. And in aviation, if I can be even a tiny bit of that thin end of the wedge, just to make someone confident enough to be seen in a pilot lounge doing some breath work, amen, alleluia. I think that's amazing.
I think what you're talking about really comes down to belief, right? Regarding what is my most valuable self? Is it my authentic self, or is it my performance self? And I could say for myself, like coming to the practice of reminding my mind again and again that my most valuable self is my authentic self, that has a real ripple effect out into the world. But it's a practice of keep on remembering, like, oh, do you believe that you need to like put on a show for other people and that that's going to be helpful to yourself and them? Or can you actually just relax and just be who you are? Are you going to perform not only just as good or even better? John, what do you make of this?
I think the parallels to what you're saying and the idea of real life versus social media, I think there's a lot of connection there. I mean, when you are sitting there making a life out of comparing yourself against others, but all you see are the perfect moments tailored specifically for social media, that has made life, even for, non-pilots, just general people, difficult. And of course, in every career, it's no different. It's almost amplified, when you're looking at a pilot on social media, and sometimes you just see where they are, what they're doing, or oh, I'm, sitting at a coffee shop in Milan. Like, that sounds glamorous, but what you don't see is the time away from home, the family events that they're missing, the nonstop flight they did overnight. So yeah, they might be at a coffee shop, but their eyes are red and they're tired. They haven't slept in 12 hours, 24 hours. 36 hours, whatever that is. So it's just that perspective of reminding yourself that it's not healthy. And you have to think about, like, what are my priorities and where am I being successful, even if it doesn't seem, comparatively speaking, that I've made it very far.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of the idea of creating a social media channel where all I do is kind of show my failures, like go in the complete opposite direction,
Right. And the thing is people probably wouldn't believe it.
Maybe not. Yeah. I was at a restaurant a few days ago and I have my meal and I have my drink and I was also working. So I took out my laptop, right? And I forgot that I put my drink on the other side of my laptop. And as I push my laptop forward, to make room for my meal, the drink topples over. It was a busy restaurant. So many people, it's just like falls everywhere, and these kids, especially that were there, just like couldn't stop like staring at me and like wondering like what I think that feels like to just, be totally embarrassed in front of the entire restaurant. Moments like that. But what I'm really curious about is like, not being upset about those moments as much as possible, or embracing them, or really believing that there are opportunities for growth. And maybe specifically we could say this in regard to, being an aviator. If you make a mistake, which I'm sure happens to everyone, what is my belief around that mistake? If I believe that I can actually learn from that mistake and become a better pilot without kind of putting myself down or creating a self-judgment, how does that change my trajectory going forward?
I mean, that's hard. It's really hard because when we make mistakes, they're very visible. I like to joke, there's a meme out there and it's Kermit the Frog, hand up against a rainy window. And the caption is, I wonder if my bad landing's still thinking about me too. And that applies to all of us, no matter what level we're at, whether we're in the airplane by ourselves, or in my case, you've got a bus full of passengers in the back. And very rarely do people comment on like, man, that was really good. It's, man, you really clunked that one in, didn't you? And you're like, oh man. So it's difficult, but I think this doesn't really answer your question, but I think one of my sort of pseudo defense mechanisms, I guess, is looking at the pilot next to me and just doing a honest debrief at the end of the flight. Like, if I can say the mistake first, I feel better. It's when I'm sitting there wondering what they're thinking, going, okay, I know I screwed that up. Did they notice? Did they not notice? How bad is it? If I can get it out there, then I at least feel better. And usually 9 times out of 10, the other pilot's like, I don't even know why you're worried about this. Like, I didn't even notice. So everybody just thinks I'm just too hard on myself. But that's just kind of how I deal with it. The acknowledgement of the mistake is there, and searching for that perfect flight. Maybe it happens every now and again, but most of us just say at some point, you stop searching because it's not going to happen. You're always going to make a mistake.
What do you think is the root of most mistakes?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, sometimes it's just when it's a physical thing that you're doing and you really don't know what's happening until kind of after the fact. Like if you think about landing an airplane, the act of doing it, for the most part, it's almost like an out of body experience. Your hands and your feet are doing what they're supposed to do, hopefully. And whatever mistakes happen are going to happen. There's nothing you can really do to stop it. You hope that the training itself is taken over and that the landing occurs safely and in a way that makes sense. But if you're going to sort of slam it in, telling yourself not to isn't going to change anything. It's like that moment has already been predetermined and you can think about it once it's already over, if that makes sense. I mean, you can't really coach yourself through the moment because your brain is just already occupied. So it's kind of that weird experience, probably similar to as Gita's experienced when you're, playing a really complicated piece of music. Like your brain takes over and you kind of wake up at the end of it and go, okay, that either went well or it didn't, but there was nothing I could do in the moment to fix it.
Interesting. All right, Gita, what's your take on this, on our relationship with mistakes and maybe the root to most mistakes?
Yeah, well, I can only speak about my mistakes because that's the only experience of mistakes that I've had, really. I can watch my students make them, but I don't know what it feels like to make them. For myself, in music and in flying, most of my mistakes happen because I'm not paying attention to the moment. When I've had landings that were less than graceful, let's call it that, I can trace it back usually to a mistake that happened 10 steps before the moment where the mistake became visible to everybody. Speed was too fast, too high, whatever, all the usual student pilot shenanigans around the pattern. Too high, too fast, got blown off the final leg or something. But usually if I look before that, my mind was either worried about the outcome or doubting my capability to do it. That little self-talk of like John said, don't mess it up. Don't screw it up. And that thought is enough to then go, oh, what if I screw it up? And part of your mind is doing that. And so then what are you going to do physically? You're going to screw it up because you've just told your brain, in essence, go ahead and screw it up. It's like my students, there's a common thing in music that maybe I can explain it this way. In music, you're supposed to stay on the beat, right? Don't get ahead of the beat while the rest of the orchestra is on the beat because then it sounds like a big mess. So sometimes I'll point out to my students, hey, you're a little off there. What happened? And they'll be like, I was rushing because I was nervous about the thing that was coming up. So I started to rush and play faster. And so I'll say, well, how are you going to fix it? And 9 times out of 10, they'll take a pencil and in the music, they'll write really big, don't rush. And I'll just say, okay, take that to rehearsal and tell me how it goes. They come back. I'm like, so how did it go? They're like, I still rushed. It didn't fix it. I'm like, well, why would that be? And so we pick it apart until, for most of us, myself included, if I say don't rush, it's like saying don't mess up, don't suck, don't be bad. And then it sets up tension. They're distracted from the present moment. And now they're trying to not do something. How do you not do something? You have to do something. So if they write in their music, stay on beat, slow down, play on the back part of the beat, or listen to the oboe. They give them something in the moment to do that's proactive on the beat every time. No, the problem disappears. And the same thing with me with landings, it usually, or any mistake, it comes back to, I'm worried that I'm not going to do a good job. And then my mind gets distracted. And then, like John said, my body and my feet are like, da, 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 da. And they do something boneheaded, and then I'm struggling and rushing to keep up. So it's a lack of attention to the present moment. I'm worried about the future, or I'm judging the past. And then the mistake shows up way, way, way later, but it's not the mistake I needed to fix. It's the thought chain before it that brought me out of what I was actually doing, which was actually pretty chill. In any given moment, you're usually pretty chill and pretty safe. And as soon as we forget that, that's when the accident chain starts. Easier said than done, sitting here on the ground, you know?
Yeah. Listening to both of you share, it occurs to me that this self-judgment that wanting to do a good job, which is completely reasonable, obviously, but that's the thing that might hold us back the most, lead to more mistakes. One of the most important moments in my life when I realized that I was completely exhausting myself from constant questioning of how good are you? Are you good enough? Just the self-judgment. I was like, wow. And I saw clearly I can continue doing that the rest of my life and never stop. And I'm just going to keep being exhausted. It's never going to end. I have some wins. I have some victories. I'm like, oh, good, Avi. I have some failures. Oh, you suck. You're not as good as other people. And just back and forth all the time. And that kind of led to this inquiry of like, whoa, is there another way of being? Does it have to be like that?
Does it have to be like that? Yes, I can very much relate to that.
Yeah.
But I think that's the double-edged sword is that, for musicians, for aviators, when we are producing something that's a very obvious product that we want to share with other people, even if it's just a flight by ourselves in the airplane, that's the trick, to not get caught in that, as John was saying earlier, that's your identity, that you did a good job doing the thing, but you're doing it for the joy of it itself and sticking with the moment and trusting the outcome will be what it's going to be. But your job is to show up and be present, which actually leads me, I want to just make sure our listeners hear a little bit about some of your choices, Avi, because you've made some choices to live in a very different lifestyle than most folks have. You live in an ashram, and that's a very intentional choice that, first of all, most people would just love to hear about. What does that even mean? What does life look like? Most people don't even know. When I say I'm going to an ashram, they're like, oh, that sounds so intense. I'm like, oh, it's actually really, really fun. It's not, they think it's some like austere, like don't have any fun, don't ever laugh, and don't fart. It's like, just be very like, well, they do. They're like, just be like, don't ever do anything that's like off color. I'm like, no. So what does that mean? But then how does this relate to, you said that was one of your moments in life where you said, I can either chase that elusive, always be perfect at things, or I can live a different way. How'd you make that decision?
Yeah, even a while before I made that decision, I was practicing yoga quite frequently in my life and found that to be a really wonderful thing. What really motivated me, and this is one of my tips I have to share at the end as well, but this practice of seeing myself in the third person. Okay. So I don't know how I came to this, but I realized that it makes a lot of sense to focus on what I can control the most, which is this one particular being. Another very common habit that I see in life is a lot of projection outward towards things that we don't control, whether it's, politics, policy, other people in our life, whatever it is. I saw the frustration behind that. I felt frustrated by it. There's lots of things happening in the world that I don't feel good about, but I don't have control over it. But I do have control over this one being. And I saw that if everyone believed that it was their number one priority job to take care of themselves, right? Like it's my number one job to take care of Avi, yours to take care of Gita, John's to take care of John. What would the world look like? And I saw that it would be completely different, right? If we all saw it as our responsibility to kind of be our own safekeepers and make decisions for our own well-being. And so why I say that is because that's really the thought that led me to living here at Yogaville, because I asked the question, what does Avi need? And I felt in a lot of ways that just he was struggling living in a world where he was swimming against the current a lot. And I also became more and more of a believer in the power of community. I think that's also a lot of what you all are doing here. You're building community, which is really powerful. So I saw that for Avi to live in community with other people that maybe have similar priorities in life. Like I like to ask deep questions. I like to explore truth. Throughout my life, I got the response, well, wow, that's really deep a lot. I've never gotten that since living here in Yogaville for 8 years. It's just how everyone operates. They want to learn about what, the deep truth is. So yeah, thank you for asking that. That's pretty much it, is like, what does Avi need? And then it's okay, he needs to live in a community where he can hopefully flourish. And then just to say a little bit about Yogaville, I guess, like it's also like a retreat center, a training center. People come here for just weekend programs to take month-long teacher trainings, things like that. So it's very interesting. There's always people coming and going. I have my family here, so I'm more stable. It's nice to kind of have that flow of energy. A very, very beautiful place out in nature. Yeah.
Well, it is my spiritual home, so don't get me started talking about Yogaville because
Yeah, yeah.
it's
But
a magical
yeah,
place.
if I can turn it back though, because I had this question that I wanted to ask you, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Gita. But the mind focusing not necessarily on what the potential mistake would be or what happens if I go wrong, but instead on having fun. The power of that. I love to play sports, so athletics is really interesting to me. So I'm always thinking about, maybe it's not so different than being a musician or being a pilot because it's very physical, right? And so I'm always wondering, well, how can I play better? So to me, what I've found is reminding myself that I'm doing this for fun. I'm doing this because I enjoy it, which is often forgotten about. Like, when you really, want to just do a good job or beat the other person or whatever it is, that's lost. And what I found is that reminding myself that I can have a good time, that it's okay to have fun, that all of a sudden I start to perform much better. So I'm curious what you both think about that.
It's the interesting draw for a lot of pilots, and it's one of the reasons why it becomes so ingrained in identity, but also the possibility of loss becomes even greater because it is what we want to do. We can't imagine doing anything else. If you didn't feel that way, very often you wouldn't make it as far as the professional side of things. You have to love it. You have to really be kind of ingrained into everything aviation just to make it work. And so because of that, it's kind of your greatest strength, but it's also kind of your biggest fear. We've talked so many times about the whole idea of pilots not going to the doctor or not getting help when they need it, because the bigger fear is, if I go to the doctor and find out I'm dying, then I don't get to fly anymore. So in that case, I'd rather just not know. Am I going to die anyways? Yeah, probably. Am I going to die faster? Also probably. But then I don't run the risk of losing my medical, which means I have to stop flying. So it's that sense of loss. It's, you go into training and you realize that a training event where you're meant to learn and you're meant to make mistakes, that's what it's for. So often we go into it and go, well, I can't screw up because if I don't get through training, then it's a black mark on my record, and who's going to hire me, and am I going to lose my job, and all of these things. So it's less, at that point, it becomes less about making mistakes and more about protecting your identity. And so that's difficult when you have a job where it's not about making things. It's not about creating the most perfect sprocket. It's about the best landing. It's about being perfect. It's something that is more ingrained on what you're doing than what you're creating. And that in and of itself kind of creates that additional pressure. You get used to it after a while and it becomes, you get better and it becomes a little bit easier, but it's just a different feeling, because that sense of loss of, if I mess this up and I lose the fun that I, really enjoy, the career that I love, I can't think of anything else I could do. Sitting me behind a desk for 8 hours a day would be miserable. It's that dichotomy of like, I really love it, but if I lost it, what would I do? Where would I go? Who am I? And so it's kind of that, it's hard to balance.
It is, right? And that maybe takes you away from the fun, the fear of losing it. Yeah.
Yeah, as yogis, right? We always talk about that loving without attachment. And I thought I was so good at that until I became an aviator. And then I experienced what John is talking about. And I get it, even as a general aviation student pilot prepping for my first check ride. If something happened now and I couldn't fly, it would be devastating. It would be a grieving process. It would be a loss, just like, when my father died a year ago. It would be that kind of like heart ripping out kind of moment. Because it is such a singular experience that you can't duplicate any other way. Like, as a musician, I left the performance world. I can still pick up my clarinet and jam anytime I want to. But if you can't fly anymore, you can't fly anymore. You're done. You could sit in the back, but it is not the same. It is not the same. So worse. It's a really razor's edge, like John was saying, of walking that line of loving it, enjoying it, having fun. And at the same time, that the clock is ticking on it, because we're all going to age out of it at some point. And so it's this constant daily bittersweet mixed with it's commercial aviation is very safe. But what I do as a general aviation pilot, there's an element of risk there every time I go up. So you're dancing on that edge as well. The mistake is not just, oh, oops, ooh, I made a fun mistake. Let's learn. Mistake can be deadly for myself and people on the ground. So it's like, to me, it's been the ultimate proving ground of all of my yoga training and all of that, to like put your butt in the seat and go fly an airplane and tell me that you're mindful. That's been kind of next level for me anyway, to really challenge that training. But my instructor does a great job because I'm ever too serious. And whenever he sees me getting all like kind of like locked up, or we get bumps or whatever, and he can tell I'm starting to get like a little nervous because we're bopping around. He just like very like quietly just goes, yeehaw. Just like, yeah.
That's
and
perfect.
It just does that every time. It just makes me laugh because I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually pretty cool. We're like dancing on the razor's edge. We're at 3,500, bumping along in turbulence. Yeehaw. Just like, enjoy the ride. You do what you can to influence the outcome, but let it go too. So it's been a really deep, intense journey for me. But yeah, the fun is there, but sometimes the fun comes when you are really serious. It's a mind game. This is why we have a podcast about it, because it really, it comes down to a mental game. At the end of the day, everyone can fly stick and rudder. Everyone knows how to fly a plane. But I think that, there's that what's going on between your head is between your two ears is the thing that determines whether it wrecks the rest of your life and or you get the most out of it that you could. So that's kind of why we have the Calm Cockpit, really.
Yeah. And to kind of go back to the original question, I mean, to spin this around in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, I mean, it's the same concepts that I talked about from a medical standpoint. Like if something medically happens, you're done. In my case, where the catalyst to this was kind of at the beginning. So I had spent 4 years in the collegiate aviation environment. I got my degree, I got my ratings. Then I spent another 4 or 5 years as a flight instructor, which is kind of that like I'm paying my dues and, waiting for the next opportunity. And it's not to say that there isn't a career in flight instruction, because there is, but I had a drive to do the next thing, which was, go to the airlines and fly jets and do all of those things. But the stress and sense of loss or worry of loss was right in that moment. I got hired by the airlines, which should have been one of the most successful days of my life. And it probably was, until the realization is, yes, you got hired, but now you've got to make it through training. Because if you don't make it through training, it's over before it starts. And not just over at that company. Who's going to hire you if you don't make it through training? So if you fail out of one airline, why would another airline hire you? They've used someone else's experience to prove that you're not worth the investment. Or at least in my head, that's how I felt. And so there's that sense of loss in the beginning of your career too, which is where all of this kind of came from, because you've put so much into it. You've realized how much you love it. You got to that point where like, okay, I think I like it. I go through the training. Nope, I really, really like it. Now I need it. And if I screw up, I lose it. And so there's all of that sense of potential loss from the very beginning to the very end, but just in a different way.
So listening to both of you talk, I have to ask about this passion that I'm sensing that you have for flying. And if you can speak to, what is that about? Like, John, like I hear in your voice this almost like such a deep fear, I have to say, just for losing this because of how much you love it, because of how much you love doing it, that it's just like almost a way of life to be doing this, and to not be doing it is not even like in the realm of possibility. So like, why is it like that? What is so great? Like in my mind, I've never done it, right? In my mind, I also think about like astronauts, right? And the perspective maybe that they get, and hearing some of their stories from like looking back at the Earth, from outer space. And so maybe it's not to that degree, but still maybe you're getting this perspective over the situation on Earth by flying up above. And I'm sure that's just a little part of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear about like, why is it that you feel this way, that you love it so much? What about it is so important to you?
It's funny. It kind of sneaks up on you. In my case, I wasn't raised in an aviation household. I wasn't somebody who from the earliest age wanted to be a pilot. I mean, I did want to be an astronaut, and my 8th grade teacher killed my dream because I wasn't smart enough to be an astronaut. But It's one of those things that I originally had kind of pulled from a book I was reading. We had a career day and I was reading a book about the main character was a pilot and was like, oh, that seems great. They seem to make a decent amount of money and don't seem to work real hard. Let's do that. And so I pursued it. And yeah, I mean, it's a hard thing to really put to words, because it's like once you experience it, you realize like this is something on a different level. Like literally, it's just different. There's a sense of adventure. There's a little bit of that sense of danger. Also feels pretty good. I mean, sometimes those landings in the worst weather where, yeah, maybe you are a little bit frightened, like, oh, this could go really poorly. And then you wrestle the airplane down, you feel great. Like you feel like you just sort of wrestled a bull and walked away from it unscathed. Like that feels great, that challenge. But then also just the freedom of being up there and doing something that I tell kids all the time when I do sort of the mentoring experiences, and they say, oh, well, I'm just a private pilot or I'm just a student pilot. And okay, that's fine. You have a long ways to go in a career, but even as a private pilot or student pilot, you've still accomplished something that less than 1% of the entire history of human beings has ever done. Like when you think about it that way, like it changes your entire perspective. Pilots, when you're in the community, it seems like everybody's doing it because they are. But when you zoom out a little bit and take the existence of even just the human beings alive right now, it's not a large community. And you really have done things that so many people haven't done. And there is a little bit of that sort of ego specialness that comes into it. As we've said, I mean, it bleeds into your life, your sense of self, your who you are. It's not just a career. It's something that I do. Even for me, when I transitioned from being an airline pilot into a charter pilot, I had a huge complex. I didn't even realize it was coming. I had spent my entire training leading up to that to become an airline pilot. That was who I was. That was what I had aspired to be. And even though I was still going to be a professional pilot at the end of it, I wasn't going to be a quote unquote airline pilot. And in my brain, I was like, who am I now? Not much has changed. It's not that different, but it's different enough to completely rewire the way you think about yourself. Where does the passion come from? I don't know. It just, once you experience it, you really can't stop it.
It's like trying to describe, like, why do you love your spouse? Like, I don't know. I love them. You can give a lot of reasons and you can start endlessly talking about it, but because you know. I mean, in my case, like, I was so terrified of flying. Like, oh my God, when I went in that small plane the first time, it was a Cessna, and I was sitting there and he started the airplane. I wanted to rip those headphones off and run away. I mean, it was like I was this close to a panic attack. I was like, I cannot go up in this little tin can. What am I doing here? But I went up, and when he finally got me to take the controls, which took a lot of coaxing, and I was actually, I wouldn't say I was flying the airplane. The airplane was flying, and my feet were on the rudders and my hand was on the yoke, but the airplane was just flying itself at that point. But I felt like I was the one in charge, and that fear just flipped. It just boop, and it was just instant love. Just fell. They say you fall in love. It's literally like falling. Like John said, you don't know why it's happening or how. It sneaks up on you and suddenly I'm falling. And then there you are. I can give a lot of reasons why. It was similar to what John said, but I think there's one moment I had where it was the first time my instructor took me on a cross-country flight to show me like an airport that I'd eventually fly to by myself, which I have now done, which was awesome. And we're flying over some university, and we weren't even that high. I think we were like at 5,000, and we looked down at like the stadium. And he was like, think about all those students down there right now in class. All of them, they're doing all this stuff. And it's just two of us up here in this little patch of air, just doing this thing. And I'm like, this is so freaking cool. Like, it's just such a unique, freeing experience. It's as close to what it feels like to do yoga and meditation, to just be fully dropped in the present moment with just that clarity. To me, it's yoga embodied, that living in that awareness that I'm simultaneously an individual human being called Gita with a personality and dreams and desires, but I'm also simultaneously part of this whole creation, and I am the whole creation at the same time. Like, it's all of the perspectives that you need at one moment to fly the darn plane.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
One thing to just mention is I think the need for performing when the stakes are high in life, in general. You're reminding me of this experience. It was a small experience, but it stands out for me. I had just moved to Yogaville. I've been here for about a month. And so I did have a kind of like an intro program for a month. And I was like more peaceful, more relaxed than I've ever been in my life. Like just, like crushing it. Maybe my ego got, oh yeah, I got this yoga thing down.
Look at me. I'm such a good yogi.
Yeah. And then I got a call I had to contact my insurance company, right? And they were increasing my insurance rate, like doubling it, right? And I just found myself so upset and like angry on the phone with them. And I got off of that. I was like, wow, just like that, boom, all of it went away. And the stakes weren't even that high. But there's something about that is necessary, that really, maybe it's about learning about ourselves, that if you can, like, right, the title of your podcast, The Calm Cockpit, like staying calm, staying relaxed in a challenging situation, that's when you really see what you're made of, right? And maybe that's like the great joy of life is, I don't know, having that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Which I think is a great time for us to ask you, help us, Avi. I know you have so much wisdom with being, to call you a yoga and meditation educator is a cruel shorthand for what you do. Because I've seen you personally lead diverse groups of people and manage to bring them sort of together in a shared inquiry of like, how do we handle this being human? So let's say you had a young pilot sitting in front of you and they came to Yogaville and they were about to leave, and go back home, and they say, okay, this has been great. I'm here with the peace and the joy and the love and the light. I'm feeling it. I'm crushing it. I'm on my game. But I know when I go home that all my bad habits are going to come right back to me. What advice would you give to our young and old pilot community about how to make these intentional moves towards having the high performance, but without sacrificing your health, your life, your greater purpose of your own humanity in the process?
And I would actually say that to have the high performance, it's necessary to get more serious about these things. Like you might, with a certain amount of pressure and stress, you can take yourself so far. But what I've seen in life is that people that are kind of taking that route, they'll come to a breaking point, where something will happen and they'll have some kind of crisis breakdown. And that's not what we want. We want sustainability. You want a nice, smooth, constant trajectory of growth if you can have it. All right. So yeah, you asked me to create like a list of some tips, which I'm happy to go over for you. Before I start, I just always want to say, like, take it or leave it, right? Like, I really believe in kind of our own inner knowing, right? And not always believing that the authority knows better than I do. I'm very interested in that, like our relationship with authority. Authority can be very powerful and obviously good in listening to other people and structures. But if you count on it too much, are you going to be able to handle the situations that are not in the guidebook, so to speak? Take it or leave it, whatever I say, adapt it to your own personal experience. Okay. So first one, number one, I want to talk about the breath, which I'm sure that you talk about. Yeah.
Speaking of, let me take a deep breath. Yeah. I'm like holding my breath. I'm like, what is he going to tell us? What is he going to tell us? Take a breath, Gita.
Yeah. So, more and more I'm just discovering the power of the breath, even though I've been practicing breath work now for quite a while. It's amazing. And it's amazing that it's always here to help no matter what the situation is. And I want to be also honest with myself about the transformation that happens when I do tune into my breath. Now, I'm not going to talk about any specific techniques. There's so many of them out there. If people are interested, you can find plenty of them. And I practice them daily. However, what's become the most important practice is simply just being aware and taking nice, long, slow, deep breaths. It's as, if not more powerful than any other technique. Also holding at the top of the inhale or the bottom of the exhale for as long as you like. And again, this is outside of authority a little bit because sometimes authority will say something, different, like there's some kind of danger for holding. My experience is, trust yourself, when it's time to breathe in again or breathe out again, then go for that. But it's just so powerful. Nice, long, slow, deep breaths. Practice as often as you like. The timer is also your friend. If you want to set timers, alarm clocks throughout the day, that's really helpful, especially when you're just getting going to do that. And then all of a sudden it just starts to become automatic and you just notice, oh, I'm off a little bit here. I could use a few deep breaths, Okay. Number 2, the body. I'd say prioritizing body maintenance, without perfectionism, and just the importance of the body that I'm learning all the time. There's not an end point. There's not a point when, okay, now I'm healthy. Now it's over. It's just care for the body is like a full-time job is the way that I see it. And that is going to lead to better performance in anything that I do, whether it's aviation or otherwise, right? When my body is happy, I'm just a better human. That's it. There's a lot in the yoga world. Sometimes we say like, I'm not the mind, I'm not the body. You got to go to that deeper level of like our core being. But I say it's really hard to get to that core place of being without the body feeling good. So lots of stuff that you can do. I mean, obviously any kind of like stretching, even little things. Also develop your own practice, the stretches that work for your particular body. Obviously staying hydrated is huge. Walking, so important, right? The sitting is the new smoking. I think that's very, very true. And also scanning the body. The parts of the body, I now see them as like people themselves, right? So I'm a big believer in the body scan that we do in yoga, especially if there's any kind of like ailment, right? Like I have issues in my back sometimes. So it's not avoiding it. It's not pretending like, oh, I'm not actually experiencing pain right now. It's no, like, let me really be with this pain and this area. So the different parts of the body, they want to be seen, spend time with them. And the mind is so powerful. So focusing the mind on those particular areas, both when there's pain and also just as regular maintenance. You start just either at the bottom of the feet or the top of the head, either way, and just work your way up or down. I think you'll notice a really nice effect. Number 3, we already talked about it. I'm not going to talk about this so much, but it's adopting a third person perspective. It's a very strange thing. It took me a while to get to this and be okay with it without kind of feeling like it's some kind of egotistical thing. I have this memory of being a kid and like Ricky Henderson, the baseball player, he would always refer to himself in the third person. Like Ricky does this and Ricky does that. And I always thought it was so weird and people were criticizing him for it and whatnot. To me, this is really powerful. It brings objectivity is really what it's about. It like takes me out of myself and I could just see, oh, that's Avi doing that again, or what does Avi need right now? I found it to be a very powerful practice. Okay. Acknowledge and release your mind. All right. So we didn't talk that much about meditation, which I love to talk about, but just a simple practice is thanking your mind. I don't know if you ever do this. It's a weird thing, but saying thank you to your mind. I mean, our minds work really hard for us, right? They really, really do. And so the way that I see it is like, okay, acknowledge that your mind is working really hard for you. Say thank you. And then if it's appropriate, give it permission to take a break, to take a rest, and also question the belief around the rest for the mind. Do I believe that if my mind can take a break, have a rest, that it will be able to operate even more effectively afterwards? What do I believe? So much of this is around belief. And I think on this point, especially, it's important. So I firmly believe I love my mind. I love thinking. And if I want to think, if I want to operate as effectively as possible, this is the carrot that John talks about, then I need to give it a break. I need to give it time to rest. And I think if you practice this, if you experience it, you'll see that it's true, that once your mind has rest, okay, like now I can dive back into like deep thinking in a way that I couldn't before. Maybe I didn't even realize that my mind was exhausted before. So that's number 4. 5, the power of the smile. Okay. We talked about fun and joy, but I'm constantly amazed at the shift in my inner state of being that occurs simply when I turn up the corners of my mouth. It's like the greatest, most simplest hack that there is. Like if I'm grumpy, I'm angry, if I'm sad, whatever it is, no pressure, but it's my choice. If I choose to turn up the corners of my mouth, all of a sudden something changes inside. And again, just like the breath, it's available all the time. You just notice what happens when I smile, just even the smallest amount. 6, the relationship with devices, cell phones. I just had to mention it because it's such a big deal these days. I started to practice once every week. I turn off my phone, in the evening time, and I don't turn it back on until like midday the next day. That might not be appropriate for whoever else, but I'm just trying to bring awareness to this relationship with this device that we have, and it's such a big deal, especially before bedtime, if it's possible to set it down like half hour before bedtime. And I know it's especially hard for pilots because your schedules are always changing all the time. So it's really hard to develop a regular routine, but relationship with the device, with the phone, I think is so important. And I'll say actually, maybe the most important question that I've learned to ask about whatever it is how much, anything. So most activities that I have are substances, how much food, how much sweets, whatever it is. It's not that it's good or bad. It's, am I having too much of it or not enough of it? The phone is incredible. I'm not one that's like going to give up my phone, or I'm not vilifying my phone, but I think asking the question of how much is really important to that. And specifically before bedtime is a good time to set it aside. Okay. And that kind of leads into number 7 is build a regular wellness routine for yourself, your way, right? Your own personal practice. Again, I think this is really challenging for pilots because it's challenging for everyone to build a regular daily routine, but especially if you're changing time zones all the time and your schedule is shifting. But that doesn't mean it's not possible or that it's not really important. My advice for starting a daily routine is start really small, right? Like just even something that you could do maybe like 10 minutes, but that you really try to do it every day and somehow you figure out a way to be successful with it. So more important to be successful than have it be like, okay, I'm going to do yoga for 30 minutes. I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes and I'm going to go for a walk for another 20 minutes, whatever it is. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Start really small. And if it's going well, check in with yourself later on and then maybe build upon it later. But I think a daily routine that's your own, that you develop yourself is essential. All right. Number 8, the last one is cultivating an interest in internal awareness. So just getting really curious about what is happening for me now and being honest about it, not being scared to look. You know, we talked about the judgment of the self and being exhausted by judging the self. So instead of that, just curiosity, what's happening, and believing in the power of awareness, right? More and more, I'm just finding that like, if I can be aware of what's happening, I don't even need to focus so much on finding solutions. The solutions take care of themselves, but the awareness comes first. So just the focus on the awareness. So I know there was a lot, but there you have it.
These are gold. Of course, as usual, I'm scribbling notes because I'm learning a lot as we're going. What I hear coming through a lot of these is how you sort of ended it, not being afraid to look, which I think is the resistance that I've seen with myself and with my yoga students sometimes to practice itself. It's not about the lack of time or that they don't want to put their cell phone down. It's like we're afraid if we look at the hard stuff that it's either going to consume us or whatever we think we're going to lose ourselves. I love what you said there, though. If we just focus our awareness on what's hurting, what's wrong in the body or in the mind, the solutions arise just because we've looked at it. And I think that's one of the leading edges with the podcast is to create those conversations with people that it is okay to look. It is okay to be vulnerable. Because as soon as you do that, as soon as you turn your attention to it, boom, you'll find solutions. But if you waste all of your time trying to deny the challenges that you're having, the problems persist. So I feel like you have so much wisdom to share. And I know that we sort of gave you the reins of the podcast to interrogate us a little bit for a change. But I would love to have you back sometime if you'd be willing to dive a little bit deeper, particularly into meditation, because I've led what I would call more performance-based meditation so far. I've been trying to be gentle with my pilot friends, right? And promise them improved performance and do just 10 minutes and you'll get some results, because I do believe that's true. But however, I also know that why most people don't stick with meditation is either because they get stuck, because they see what's in their mind and it kind of freaks them out. And so then they just kind of stop doing it because they don't know how to deal with it or if it's normal. So they stop doing it. So I think someone like you, maybe we could do an episode where we unpack some of the acknowledging that has to go on when you sit with yourself in meditation day after day and normalizing that practice a little bit, because that's when you really get those performance outcomes. And what's interesting is you don't care about the performance outcomes as much when you do that meditation. You know, it kind of starts to unpack all of that. But anywho, these are amazing tips. John, which one stuck out to you before we let Avi go on his way today? Which one kind of pinged in your brain? Do you want me to...
I think the self-scan one is a big one for me as well. I have dipped my toe into some of the sort of mindfulness meditation type things, and I think I've noticed that just in that scan, it's the one that brings me the most sort of chill, the most calm. It does work. I mean, again, it's like describing flying. It's kind of hard to exactly put that to words, but in terms of a get out of jail free type event, I mean, just taking, even if it's a minute and a half to cycle through your body and think about those things, it's a great way to sort of bring that blood pressure down in a emergencies type situation, using emergency loosely, of course, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to go for.
Yeah, when you're in that crew rest bunk in the back of the plane and you have half an hour to rest. Great thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Avi, gold, absolute gold. Cannot thank you enough. I feel like you created sacred space even here in a podcast. You have a gift for it though, but thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with our listeners. Thank you for sharing your time, and thank you for being willing to put a little bit of everything you know to the side to help us kind of bring the mission of the podcast to the front. It's really meaningful to me, and I know to John as well. And we do hope you come back and possibly teach us a more comprehensive deep dive into one of these topics. Would be really, really beneficial. You have a great gift, and we're very honored that you spent some time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you're both doing. I feel the importance of it. And thanks for letting me take the reins. That was fun.
Dearest listeners, I hope you loved that as much as I did. And I am really looking forward to having Avi back at some point to dive into his teaching expertise. And I'm hoping he'll come back on to teach us some meditation and to get a little more into that. And before I forget, I also want to give a plug for his book, his website, his courses. He leads lots of programs at Yogaville, which is the ashram where he lives. I'll link all that in the show notes. So if you're interested in taking a course with him, I highly recommend it. And just a quick note, since we recorded this interview, I did try one of Avi's tips, the third person perspective exercise. And for any of you who've ever watched Seinfeld with the episode with Jimmy, you know what I'm talking about. Jimmy talks about himself in the third person all the time. So whenever I hear that third person stuff, I think of that episode and I burst out laughing. But I said, well, I got to give it a try, because out of all the things that Avi said, these are things familiar to me because I am an integral yogini. Those are the things I do every day, but that's one that I haven't tried. So I pushed myself to get out of my comfort zone and try it. And it felt really weird and cringy at first. I was like washing dishes and I was like, what does Gita need for dinner? Gita needs blah, blah, blah. But as I did it, it actually got easier. I lost the cringe factor a little bit. I got over my laughing at it, thinking about the Seinfeld episode with Jimmy talking about himself in the third person. And over time, I did notice that it did give me just a tiny bit of distance. It seemed to take off like the emotional charge of making decisions for myself and gave me a little more like neutral view on myself. I haven't tried it that much, but that was like a couple day experiment. So, I try to put these things into play too. I'd love to hear if anybody tries that out. Drop us an email at calmcockpit@gmail.com and let me know if you can bring yourself to speak about yourself in the third person. It's an interesting concept. Okay, so much great stuff from Avi, but we really want to give you like our top picks of the season. We completed season 1. It's a great time to kind of look back and share with you the things that we really, really love. I won the coin toss, so I get to go first. So my top pick for the season is actually to clarify something that you guys have been helping me figure out, which is why I feel like aviation is behind on the mental performance and mental health game. I think I even said it in this interview. I feel like we're 15 years behind, but I don't think I've ever really clarified that for you guys, like what I mean when I say that. And if you look at episode 15, The Resilient Aviator with Dr. Adrienne Adler-Neal, she talks about it so beautifully and so clearly because she's an MD. She has all the public health training. She has, the psychiatric training, and she gave such a clear explanation of it. I said, yeah, that's what I've been trying to say. I highly recommend that episode because the biosocial framework that she's using for her work, I think really speaks to how particularly Westerners speak about this stuff. So why I think we are behind in general, I'm going to quote Aristotle here because why not? I count him braver who overcomes his desires than he who conquers his enemies. For the hardest victory is the victory over self. The hardest battles we fight are the battles within ourselves. Our impulses to check our email, social media versus drinking more water. And for me, as a yoga practitioner, yoga is a set of practices, lifestyle habits that like enhance our natural talents and attributes through conscious effort. We look at like uprooting our conditioned mental patterns and reactions, and we try to understand our emotional reactions. And this then ideally leads us to a state of unity where our mind and emotions and our actions function in harmony. So we're constantly literally fighting that battle within, sort of like our lower self desires, our knee-jerk reactions versus what we know and want and how we want to be in the world. And this is why I think we are behind in aviation right now with mental performance training strategies and mental health strategies and honestly physical health strategies, is because we don't have tools in the curriculums to address how to understand what's really motivating our thoughts and our actions. And this is why I mentioned episode 15 is my must listen for this season, because Dr. Adler-Neal has a moment in that episode where we said, we tell people, listen to your body, use the I'm safe checklist. And she said, no. She started shaking her head and I knew where she was going. She was like, most people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to listen to their body. They don't know that their internal emotions are actually pushing their intellect because they haven't spent the time to do that work of battling that internal self and uprooting all those unconscious motivations and even understanding that that's what's driving them from the inside out. And that's why I say I think we're behind, because we say do the I'm safe checklist, but most people live in such a state of chronic fatigue and poor diet and a lack of awareness of their emotions and their conditioned patterns that they have since childhood are driving them. They're using a flawed mind to make decisions that they're okay to do things because they haven't been trained in how to look at themselves with more neutral compassion and therefore more clarity. So the I'm safe checklist is only great if you have a clear mind that can observe itself. And this is why I love that Aristotle quote, I count him braver who overcomes his desires than he who conquers his enemies. So I consider that like your, not just your desires, but your impulses. And your enemy might be getting that next type rating or that next perfectionistic goal that you're looking outside of yourself for satisfaction. The hardest victory is the victory over self. To know ourselves and to really do that work is really hard. And I think Dr. Adler-Neal really explained it really well, that without looking within and working on some of the junk we're carrying around, our big traumas and little traumas, she called it, we're a little bit sunk because we're using a flawed mind to investigate a flawed mind. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but go listen to her say it in episode 15. She does a great job. So that's why I think we're behind. I think we need not only train the I'm safe checklist, we need to train people in what does that even mean? How to meditate, how to look at the mind, how to journal, how to do any strategy you can find so that you can get to know yourself better. So you're reacting from a sort of place of higher consciousness rather than just conditioned programming. End of soapbox rant. John, do you have a takeaway? Because I just kind of went deep into the well there.
Wilson, America's neighbor from Home Improvement, once said, our brightest blazes of glory are commonly kindled by unexpected sparks.
I love it.
Now, what that has to do with anything, I have no idea, but I felt like I needed to quote somebody. And Wilson says a lot of good things.
Isn't he the guy you could only see his hat above the head? And he was the ever philosopher. Love it.
So anyways, I could go on. I could quote Yoda or Gandalf, some of the brighter thinkers of our time. But I think what I have learned most, it's a little more on the philosophical side than yours, I suppose. And it really comes down to a lot of these things that we started this podcast for, a lot of the things that I had thought about or felt or gone through over the years, wondering if anybody else ever did. I think that, all of these conversations that we've had over the past year have only proven that nobody's as unique as they think they are. You think that you have this experience and that it's only you and that you're alone and all of these things, only to find out that everyone else feels those things to one degree or another, and that the world is a lot smaller place and a lot more similar place when you look at those things versus the differences that we have. And so I think that that's really important. I think that however confident we pilots think we are, however weak in these moments we feel we might be, they're fleeting moments. And that's what this podcast is all about, to show that, to show how you can overcome it, how you can come out better. And as far as, some of the episodes that I would reference, one specific to me, I think that is extremely important to especially aspiring aviators, is the episode with Bob Mader.
Yes.
Now, Geeta, I don't have the episode numbers down quite as well as you do, but I think it was maybe episode 2 or 3 was the imposter syndrome with Bob. And if one of the top most prolific flight instructors in the nation, who has also been the chairman of the board for the National Association of Flight Instructors, can stand in a room and wonder why they asked him there to speak on flight instruction of all things, I think that can teach anyone who's aspiring to be anything, or who already might be something, who feels that same way. You're your own worst critic. And when you think you don't belong, but you are surrounded by people who disagree with you, maybe it's time to believe everyone else instead of that little voice in the back of your head. So short and sweet, but I have one other Wilson quote lined up, and I think that it's also suited here. And he says, now granted, this is a quote of a quote, but he says, renowned psychologist Irvin D. Yalom postulated that men and women relive their isolation by bonding over common fears and experiences.
Oh.
And I think that that's, again, what this podcast is all about. So for any of you that have listened over this last year's entirety of season 1, if it has helped heal some of that isolation you may or may not have felt on any of the things that we've talked about, or in any of the things that we will continue to talk about, then it was all worth it. So thank you for listening.
Amen to that. I think the number one thing that I've taken away from all of this is community is everything. And I'm so grateful to you, John, for bringing me into this podcast. If you had told me back when I started with my fear of flying journey that I would be on a podcast hosting about aviation topics, I would have been, say what? That's not even the coolest part. The coolest part is the community and the feeling not so alone and getting to know the listeners and sharing this information. So I'm super psyched for season 2. Away we go. And folks, if any of this has resonated with you, we love hearing from you. Please feel free to drop us a message, calmcockpit@gmail.com. We love hearing from you, even if it's just to share something that stays private between the 3 of us. We absolutely love it. It gives us fuel to keep on going. Please tap that 5-star review. That would be super helpful. It helps other people to find the show. And that's, again, what we're trying to do here is bring community together. So open that podcast player right now. Tap 5 stars. If you can use your little thumbs to tippity tap a little few sentences, that's great too. But we really appreciate the reviews. And what else? You can find us on socials. Calm Cockpit Podcast, mostly on Facebook. We're over there on Instagram as well. I guess that's a wrap on this first episode of season 2. Away we go. And my friends, until next time, fly smarter
and stress less.
Airbus Pair 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.